put that lantern out right now, Emeka?" His wife's voice came out barely above a whisper as she stepped beneath the ancient canopy of the Umyo forest, her warm eyes turning cold and flat in the pale moonlight. It took exactly 2 steps into the dark thicket before the freezing knot of dread tightened in Emeka's stomach, because the woman he had slept beside for 5 years was moving through the trees with the silent, predatory grace of a complete stranger. His childhood friends had always warned him that Oluchi was too quiet, too detached from the struggles of village life, but he had never listened, telling himself her silence was simply a gentle nature. Now, deep in the forbidden dark, he had to ask himself the question that would change everything. What was she burying deep inside these woods where no village eye could ever see? To find out what Emeka discovered when he finally broke his promise and followed her into the dark, make sure to like this video, subscribe to African Folktales by Nela, and turn on notifications so you never miss our deep, gripping stories. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to African Folktales by Nela. My name is Nela, and on this channel we bring you emotional, touching, and spine-tingling stories that will keep you hooked from beginning to end. If you enjoy stories like this, do not forget to subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Now let us begin. Life in Nigeria can humble a person very fast. 1 minute you and your friends are shouting "we move," celebrating big dreams and city ambitions. The next minute you are counting what is left of your ancestral crops with a calculator, wondering where everything went wrong. In that difficult season, 3 people stood at the center of the village of Umyo. There was Emeka, a proud and stubborn farmer who believed his grandfather's soil was the only wealth a man truly needed. There was Chidi, his childhood friend who chased city money like a man running from a fire. And there was Oluchi, Emeka's wife, a woman so quiet and so still that most people in the village had simply stopped trying to read her. If you saw Emeka and Oluchi together from a distance, you would have thought they had the most peaceful marriage in all of Umyo. Always farming together, always talking about the children they would one day have, always building their future with their bare hands. But Chidi saw things differently. That man loved money the way most men love sleep. If a luxury car from the capital passed through once, his neck would swing around like a ceiling fan. He always said the same thing: "I cannot come to this earth and suffer." Emeka too had ambitions, but his were quieter and more rooted. He wanted a stable farm, a solid house, a family name that would mean something across the territory. Nothing more. Now Oluchi. That woman was different in a way that was difficult to explain. She was not lazy. She was not dull. She was just quiet. Too quiet, sometimes. While her husband was out shouting about crop prices and village meetings, Oluchi sat weaving baskets and calculating things deep inside her head that she never shared with anyone. As the pressure from the city began to crush the village like a heavy boot, Emeka refused to bend. His mates were already relocating to the capital, posting pictures of luxury cars and signing big business deals. Meanwhile, Emeka stood his ground in Umyo, defending his inherited land like a man prepared to die on it. Then a giant corporate agency arrived and began surveying the farmlands, telling the villagers their old documents meant nothing under the new development laws. Nobody listened to the farmers. And as if that were not enough, Emeka's father died suddenly, family debts began to pile up like stones on a cracking roof, and Oluchi started walking into the deep forest alone every single night, carrying a heavy wooden box with a brass padlock that she never once opened in front of her husband. The midday sun beat down hard on the dry soil of the Umyo farmlands, turning the sweat on Emeka's bare shoulders into a thin sheen of salt as he swung his heavy iron machete through the tall grass. Around him, the endless green fields rolled quietly toward the dark edge of the ancient forest, and nearby, old Boba Okafor was slowly leading his goats along the dusty pathway while 2 younger farmers called greetings across a patch of cassava plants. Emeka wiped his forehead with the back of his hand and looked down at the straight rows of yams he had planted exactly where his grandfather used to stand, feeling a warmth in his chest that no corporate paper could threaten. He wore his favorite faded green wrapper tied at his waist, the fabric stained with the rich dark earth that he believed belonged to his bloodline forever. Oluchi appeared from the narrow bush path, walking softly into the clearing in a simple blue cotton dress that was dusty at the hem. She set a clay bowl of pounded yam and fresh palm nut soup on a smooth wooden stump in the shade of a large mango tree nearby, where village children were playing a game with small stones in the distance. Emeka smiled widely and picked up his wooden spoon, his chest full of plans. "Eat quickly. The sun is moving fast." Her voice was completely flat. She did not sit beside him on the bench. "This soil will never fail us, my wife. Before the next rainy season, I will buy the neighboring plot from the elders and our name will be known across the entire territory." Oluchi did not look at the fields. She did not look at the steaming food she had carried on her head for miles under the scorching heat. Instead, her large almond eyes stayed fixed on the distant, misty canopy of the ancient trees, her slender fingers tightening around the edges of her apron as if she were already counting the hours until the night arrived. Emeka dug his spoon into the food, completely unaware that the very land he was so proudly planning to expand was already listed on a corporate survey map inside his wife's locked wooden box. The dusty village square of Umo was usually filled with women spreading cassava on wide mats to dry, but on that morning 3 heavy white corporate trucks roared into the open space and kicked up thick clouds of red dirt that sent the market sellers scrambling to cover their faces and their goods. Emeka arrived at the crowded square wearing a clean brown wrapper and a black short-sleeved shirt, his jaw set tight as he pushed through the frightened crowd. 4 tall security guards in heavy boots and bulletproof vests stood in a straight line, holding metal buttons to keep the shouting villagers back from the community notice board. A corporate agent in a sharp grey suit climbed onto a wooden crate and began slapping white glue across the board with a thick brush, pressing a large official notice against the wood. Chief Egui, the oldest elder in Umio, walked forward on his shaky wooden walking stick, his wrinkled face wet with sweat as he reached out his trembling hands to speak for his people. But before the old man could say a single word, the corporate agent shoved him aside roughly, causing Chief Egui to trip over a stone and drop his stick into the mud in front of the entire stunned crowd. Emeka felt a wave of hot anger rush through his chest and stepped right up to the line of guards. "You cannot march onto our land and put your hands on our elders. My grandfather's papers are locked safely in my house, and they prove that this ground belongs to the Nofa family forever." The corporate agent did not even turn his head. He wiped his sticky fingers with a small white towel, climbed down from the crate, and climbed into the front seat of the lead truck without a single word to Emeka. The development rights belong to the multinational agro-industrial company now. He said it to the windshield, then slammed the door shut. Emeka stood tall in the settling red dust, looking around at his neighbors and feeling completely certain that his legal documents would protect everything he had built. He walked home with his head high, entirely unaware that the guards he had just defied were acting on land deeds that already carried his wife's secret signature. The small atom courtyard behind Emeka's house was shadowed by the falling night, lit only by a tiny wood fire where palm oil popped softly in a clay pot. Outside the low mud wall, village women were walking home from the stream with yellow jerrycans balanced on their heads, and a hunter with a rusted gun slung over his shoulder passed the wooden gate without stopping. Emeka sat on a low stool near the doorway in a sleeveless white tank top and a grey wrapper, his fingers rolling a small piece of tobacco nervously while his eyes tracked Oluchi across the yard. She was kneeling in the dirt beside a stack of dried corn husks, her waist-length braids tied back with dark twine, her maroon wraparound cloth stained with charcoal at the waist. She was sliding a thick bundle of papers into the wooden box, her movements slow and completely silent, her back turned to her husband. Emeka's heart pounded. His proud speech in the village square that afternoon had not stopped the corporate trucks from parking right at the edge of his property. What are you keeping inside that box, Oluchi? If those city men come back tomorrow, I will need every paper I have to stand before the elders and prove we cannot be moved. Oluchi rose slowly, her slim fingers closing around the iron handle of the box. She clicked the heavy brass padlock shut with a sharp sound that echoed across the quiet yard. Then she turned and looked at him, her large almond eyes staring through him into the gathering mist beyond the gate. Never follow me into the forest, Emeka. She lifted the box onto her shoulder and walked through the gate without looking back. Emeka waited until her footsteps dissolved completely into the darkness. Then his anger and stubborn pride pushed him off the stool. He grabbed his rusted kerosene lantern from the windowsill, struck a match, and walked past the ancient boundary stone into the forbidden trees. He told himself he was protecting his land. He had no idea he was walking toward the moment that would cost him everything. The ancient Umuo forest was completely black, the pale moonlight smothered by the thick canopy above as a freezing mist rolled through the giant mahogany trees and curled around Emeka's damp skin. He moved quickly along the slippery earth in his sweat-stained tank top and mud-splattered wrapper, holding the kerosene lantern high above his head as the crickets screamed around him. Far ahead, 2 wild bush pigs dashed through the dense undergrowth and broke the eerie silence, and a large night owl opened its dark wings and swept over the branches without a sound. Emeka stopped to catch his breath, his heart hammering as he scanned the thick bush for any sign of Oluchi's maroon cloth. Then a group of fruit bats screeched out from a nearby thicket and scattered across his face in a burst of leathery wings, and when his eyes refocused, her shadow was completely gone in the blinding fog. He stumbled blindly off the main path, his bare foot catching on the exposed root of a massive hollow iroko tree covered in dark green moss. The lantern light swept across a wide opening in the trunk, and something familiar caught his eye. A small, neat pile of smooth river stones, deliberately placed. Emeka dropped to his knees in the wet dirt, his hands shaking as he pushed the stones aside. Beneath them was a stack of official papers hidden inside the hollow wood. He held them close to the hot glass of his lantern, his eyes moving across the bold corporate stamp of the multinational agro-industrial company. And there, at the bottom of the eviction list, written in clear deliberate ink beside a record of a massive cash payment, was Oluchi's full maiden name. The freezing knot in his stomach became a stone. The silent woman he had trusted for 5 years had not been protecting their home. She had already sold it. The open-air village tavern was already noisy when Emeka arrived the next morning, local palm wine tappers dropping off fresh gourds while 2 young boys swept fallen leaves from the wooden benches. Emeka moved through the space in a rough yellow wrapper and a creased brown shirt, his chest tight, his eyes searching past the laughing elders toward the far corner table. Chidi was there, freshly arrived from the capital, wearing a stiff white designer suit and large gold rings that caught the morning light. But something was wrong. As a waiter set a glass of beer in front of him, Chidi's manicured fingers trembled so badly the liquid spilled across his expensive leather watch. His eyes were bloodshot, and his smartphone buzzed continuously on the table, its screen flashing with urgent messages from city numbers demanding payment. He slapped his palm over the screen the moment he saw Emeka approaching and forced out a wide, hollow laugh. "Emeka, my brother. Still wearing the dust of Umuo on your skin. Come, leave this dead village and follow me to the capital where real money lives. A man like you should not be breaking his back for a piece of ground that will never make him rich." Emeka sat down slowly opposite him and looked at his friends shaking hands. He had not yet told anyone what he had found hidden inside the hollow iroko tree. "The city has not given you peace, Chidi. A giant corporate agency is trying to tear down my grandfather's fences, and I am going to fight them with every document I own." The fake smile dropped from Chidi's face instantly. He leaned forward across the table, his voice dropping to a panicked whisper, his thumb rubbing at the gold ring on his finger like a man praying. "You are a fool, Emeka, because those corporate syndicates own the ears of the biggest men in this state. Do not sacrifice yourself for soil. Even the person who prepares your food at night is collecting envelopes of cash to build their own escape. The warning hit Emeka like cold water, but he straightened his wrapper and held his ground, completely convinced that his inherited legal documents were still powerful enough to expose the thieves and save what remained of his marriage. A violent rainstorm slammed into the muddy forest edge of Umeå without warning. Inside a large open shelter used by the local palm oil pressers, terrified village women clutched crying babies while two hunters frantically tied their goats to the wooden pillars to keep them from washing away in the rising water. Emeka stood at the front of the shelter in a soaked dark blue rain wrapper, his fingers white around his grandfather's wet papers, watching a young man named Obi kneel in the slush outside the shelter with a dented orange flashlight in his hands. Obi's older brother Nduka, a thin 15-year-old who had been boasting all morning about going to spy on the mysterious midnight meetings at the forest path, was nowhere to be found. Only his deeply stamped footprints remained, filling rapidly with muddy rainwater until even those disappeared. Obi's voice broke into a loud sob as he held up the flashlight to the elders. Nduka went to watch the forbidden path after the morning market. He swore he saw a giant black city car waiting near the thicket. His footprints just stop right here where the grass is trampled, and now the forest has taken him because he saw the faces of the people who come to steal our land. Emeka stepped forward into the downpour, refusing to let fear show on his face in front of the village. The boy was careless in the storm. No hidden city men can frighten us of our own inherited property. I will go to the land registry office myself tomorrow and use these papers to show everyone that Umeå cannot be broken by ghost stories. Old Baba Okafor shook his head slowly from under a wet blanket near the palm oil barrels, his wrinkled face turned toward the dark swaying trees as a huge bolt of lightning tore across the sky. You do not understand the danger, Emeka. Whoever is buying our forest is not playing a simple game of property lines. They will remove anyone who stands in their path. Nduka's empty shoes are the proof that the predators are already inside our fences. Emeka squeezed his wet documents tightly and said nothing more, still certain that paper and law would protect him. He had no idea that following Oluchi into the forest had already placed a target on his own chest. The regional land registry office in the neighboring town was a bustling, sunlit courtyard of ancient ceiling fans and long queues of loud traders arguing over property tax receipts. Outside the open concrete arches, typing pool agents hammered their metal typewriters while a street vendor shouted the price of cold pure water to the passing crowd. Emeka stood at the high wooden counter in a clean dark green cotton shirt, his jaw locked, watching an elderly clerk named Mr. Alao slowly flip the dusty pages of a massive leather ledger. Mr. Alao stopped on a yellowed page and tapped a crisp document glued into the file. Emeka leaned over the counter and felt his chest tighten instantly. At the bottom of the page, stamped in bright purple official ink, was his own name. The handwriting matched every curve of the signature he had only ever used on his wedding certificate, a personal script that only 2 people in the entire world had ever seen. Everything is fully legal, young man. Your family farm was sold directly to the multinational agro-industrial corporation 3 months ago. The payment was transferred to a private bank account in the capital city. A wave of icy cold washed down over Emeka's shoulders. His pride did not shatter. It simply went quiet. This is a mistake. I have never signed a single paper agreeing to sell my grandfather's soil. Not one. Mr. Alao sighed and shook his head slowly, adjusting his iron blue shirt before pointing toward the crowded exit. The law only reads what is written on the page, my friend. Go back to your compound and ask the person who prepares your evening meals who truly owns the roof above your head. Emeka walked out into the hot afternoon sun, squeezing his grandfather's papers into a useless ball in his fist, still telling himself he would find a city lawyer and overturn the fraud. He did not yet know that while he stood in that registry office, the farm fences his grandfather had built were already being loaded onto corporate trucks. The dark boundary edge of Emeka's inherited farm was split open by the harsh yellow headlights of two massive corporate bulldozers, their heavy diesel engines shaking the earth as their iron teeth pushed through the tall weeds. Curious neighbors from the next compound stood behind orange plastic tape in the background, whispering and pointing, while a local night guard rode his bicycle frantically toward the village to call the elders. Emeka stood frozen in the middle of his trampled yam rows in a dark purple tunic and dusty green wrapper, his boots sinking into the wet soil as the lead machine cracked his grandfather's wooden fence into splinters. A corporate supervisor named Mr. Benson stepped out from behind the giant tires in an orange safety vest and white hard hat, holding a clipboard under his arm and a laminated document in his hand. He walked straight up to Emeka and held the paper under his nose. "This is an official court eviction decree. Your time on this property is finished. The entire development territory has been cleared by our billionaire benefactor in the capital city, and any person who remains on this ground past tonight will be arrested by the state authorities." Emeka's breathing stopped. His hands dropped to his sides. He looked past the flashing yellow lights toward the thick, silent canopy of the ancient forest. And there, standing perfectly still beneath the low branches of a massive mahogany tree, was Oluchi. She wore a long, elegant black dress that was completely clean and pressed. She held a shiny leather purse on her shoulder. She did not cry. She did not move toward her husband. She stood and watched the heavy metal blades tear up the soil they had farmed together for 5 beautiful years with cold, steady eyes and something close to satisfaction on her face. In that moment, Emeka understood that his peaceful family life had been a lie from the beginning. The dense thorn thicket just past the farm boundary stone was dark and tangled, the distant roar of the bulldozers shaking the damp earth through the branches. Emeka marched into the center of the clearing, his teeth clenched, the loose edges of his wet wrapper dragging through the sharp thorns. He turned on Oluchi, who followed him into the darkness in her long black dress, her face completely smooth and dry under the moonlight, her silver earrings catching the faint glow of the distant headlights. Emeka grabbed her wrist roughly and pulled her back. Her leather purse fell from her shoulder and landed in the wet mud, spilling her golden hairpins into the dirt. Oluchi winced as his fingers pressed into her skin and looked down at her ruined belongings, and for just a moment something cracked in her expression. Not guilt. Not fear. Something older and sadder than both. The realization that the gentleman she had built a life beside was gone, replaced by a stranger she had helped to create. Emeka loosened his grip but did not let go. "Why did you forge my name and sell my grandfather's home behind my back, Oluchi? 5 years. 5 years we built this together. Why?" Oluchi looked straight into his eyes and let the silence sit for a long moment before she answered. Her voice was low and absolutely steady. "Umio was already finished the moment the city agents mapped these roads, Emeka. Your ancestral pride is a beautiful thing. But pride does not feed a family through the coming years, and it does not protect a woman when the walls begin to fall. I did what I had to do so that we would both survive what was coming. The capital city is where the future lives now. I need you to come with me tonight." Emeka let go of her arm slowly. The rage in his chest did not leave, but it made room for something worse, the terrible weight of a man who could not tell anymore whether he had been betrayed or simply left behind. He looked toward the lights of the corporate trucks and made a decision. He would go to the city. He would find the people behind this, expose them, and reclaim his name. What he did not know was that the billionaire behind the eviction was already waiting for them both, and that he had known Oluchi's name long before Emeka ever did. The glass-walled balcony of the luxury Eco Hotel suite looked out over the blazing, hyperactive streets of the capital city, where thousands of bright yellow taxis honked in the heavy evening traffic far below. Out on the dark water of the lagoon, several motorized cargo boats drifted slowly toward the harbor, their white searchlights cutting through the humid night air. Emeka sat stiffly on a cold metal chair at the edge of the balcony in a stiff new black polo shirt and tailored blue trousers that felt tight and unnatural on his skin, like clothes borrowed from someone else's life. Inside the open glass doors behind him, Oluchi stood before a giant gold-framed mirror, her long braids pinned neatly up with silver clips as she adjusted a striking crimson silk gown that dragged across the polished marble floor. The sound of Afrobeat music leaked through the walls from a party down the hallway. Emeka stared at his polished leather shoes and tried to remember the last time he had felt like himself. The driver is waiting at the front lobby. We need to go. Oluchi picked up a diamond-studded handbag from the glass table without looking at him. Emeka stood and looked at her reflection in the bright mirror, at the beautiful and completely unfamiliar woman looking back at him. I am ready. And I will make sure that whoever is at the head of this operation tonight understands exactly who they are dealing with. Oluchi said nothing. She walked past him with a wave of expensive perfume and stepped into the corridor without glancing back. Emeka followed her into the bright, crowded lobby with his shoulders squared and his head high, entirely certain that the evening ahead would give him the platform to expose the land thieves. He had no idea he was walking step by step into a trap that had been built specifically for him. The grand ballroom of the Oriental Hotel was a sea of crystal and polished marble, 3 enormous chandeliers pouring warm light down over hundreds of wealthy developers and politicians in black tuxedos who laughed and clinked wine glasses while a classical orchestra played smoothly on a raised stage. Emeka moved slowly through the crowd in a new dark grey designer suit and a silk tie that pinched his throat, feeling like a ghost at a feast he had never been invited to attend. He spotted Chidi hiding behind a massive concrete pillar near the kitchen doors, still in his wrinkled white designer suit, now damp with sweat at the collar. Chidi's gold rings were gone. His hands were shaking so badly that cheap water sloshed over the rim of his glass. His bloodshot eyes darted between the crowd and 2 hotel security guards slowly checking invitations near the entrance. When he saw Emeka approaching, the fear on his face deepened rather than eased. You do not belong in this ballroom, Emeka. Leave now, before the heavy operators notice your face. I used everything I had left to buy a fake ticket just to find a loan from these directors, and even that will not save me. My creditors have already reported my bounce checks to the management. This room will swallow you whole. Emeka looked at the shadow of the boy who used to laugh loudest in the Umo Tavern and felt a cold sour move through him. I am not running. Oluchi brought me here to meet the main board, and I will use that meeting to demand answers for what was done to my family's land. Chidi let out a long, shivering breath. He pointed toward the grand head table where staff were adjusting the main microphone, his hand trembling visibly. Emeka, listen to me carefully. Your wife did not bring you here to fight for anything. She brought you here as a witness. To watch the final signature that gives your grandfather's soil away forever. The wide ocean-facing terrace of the hotel was cool and open, white linen cocktail tables spread across the stone tiles while wealthy patrons sipped drinks near iron railings above the dark Atlantic. Below the deck, heavy waves broke against the concrete seawall, and several luxury yachts drifted past the harbor with their lights glowing softly in the distance. Emeka stood near a tall palm planter gripping the cold stone ledge with both hands to stop his fingers from shaking. Inside the ballroom behind him, the master of ceremonies tapped the microphone and called the laughing audience to order. Oluchi stood perfectly still in her crimson gown, her eyes fixed on the velvet-draped stage where a giant banner celebrated international charity donations to displaced rural communities. A tall executive in a sharp black tuxedo stepped under the spotlight and announced the evening's headline donor with a wide, confident smile. Chief Donald Hobart. The name hit Emeka like a physical blow. It was the same bold signature that had sealed the eviction decree tearing his grandfather's farm apart just days before. The ballroom broke into loud applause, and Emeka stepped backward onto the cold terrace tiles, his heart pounding. The man who had stolen his earth was being celebrated by a room full of people for saving farming communities. The crushing weight of that irony was enough to empty a man of everything he had left. Oluchi walked out onto the terrace a few moments later, her diamond handbag swinging gently against her crimson dress. She took her place at the railing without a word. Emeka looked at her profile in the faint light coming from the ballroom and understood, finally and completely, that the woman beside him had chosen this life long before he had any say in the matter. He had lost his ancestral home. He had lost his marriage to a secret he had never been allowed to see. And the man responsible was inside that ballroom right now, accepting applause. Months passed. Then a year. Then more. The vast sunlit deck of a luxury catamaran sailed slowly across the open blue waters of the Lagos Lagoon, far from the forest paths and crumbling farmlands of Emeka's past life. Wealthy city investors in expensive linen suits clinked champagne glasses and laughed over jazz music while uniformed servers moved smoothly through the high society crowd with silver trays of roasted prawns. To anyone watching from the shore, Emeka would have looked like a man who had arrived. He stood near the steering wheel in a loose white silk shirt and cream trousers, looking every bit the successful corporate director he had fought and bled and bent himself into becoming. He watched a young clumsy deckhand named Ton accidentally drop a heavy metal winch handle that rolled across the polished wood and struck the expensive leather shoe of a wealthy developer nearby. The developer turned with his hand already raised. Emeka stepped forward without hesitation and intercepted the man's arm, quietly pulling a stack of cash from his own pocket and pressing it into the developer's hand to cover the scuffed shoe. Ton bowed his head in deep gratitude and hurried back to his work, not knowing what had just happened on his behalf. Emeka turned back toward the water. He had had someone once when his pride had broken open and left him with nothing but his own fist. He would spend the rest of his life making quiet repayments for that night. Oluchi stepped out from the covered cabin in a matching white sundress and dark sunglasses, a glass of red wine held loosely in her hand. She took her place at the railing beside him without a word. They stood together like that as the catamaran moved through the light, two wealthy people in a golden cage of their own making, never quite looking at each other, never quite looking away. Winning the entire world means absolutely nothing when you must spend the rest of your life sharing a table with the person who broke your soul. Thank you so much for staying with us all the way to the end of Emeka's journey. If this story moved your heart or made you think about what truly matters in this life, please share it with one person who needs to hear it today. Do not forget to like this video, leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to African Folktales by Nella. We truly appreciate every one of you for your warmth and support. Until next time, take care of yourselves and we will see you in the next story.